If possible, we'll come back to the questions that were typed in the chat format at a later time.
So Craig described all about how to enter the geometry for multifamily buildings. Now I'm going to start talking about the option screen. And in general, all of the options selected on the option screen apply across all of the units. There's only one option screen for the whole building. But in certain instances, the way that the options are modeled can vary from one unit to another. One example of that is in the Windows area category. The window option that you select will define the square footage of the windows on the 4 facades, front, back, left, right. And the way these total areas for the 4 facades will then get split up to the individual units based on each unit's exposed surface area on that facade. So in general, this works well, and if you have units with equal surface area on a given facade, then it'll distribute the windows equally. And we did add a new way of specifying window area, which you can see in these options 2 through 6 here. Whereas before you would specify a window-to-wall ratio for the entire building, and then fractions that would distribute that window area to the 4 facades. These new type of options has a window-to-wall ratio for each facade. And this works particularly well for multifamily buildings, which can have a pretty wide variety of aspect ratios. Another category where things are different from one unit to the next is air leakage. So there's a single option or a single input for the air leakage of the building, ACH 50. And you can think of this as kind of the total for the building. So if you add up the leakage flow rates from a blower door test for all units and then divide by the volume of all units, you'll get a single ACH 50. And the way this gets used in the model is we convert this to an equivalent leakage area, and then we apportion the equivalent leakage area to each unit proportionally based on that unit's exposed surface area. And the unit geometry will also affect the wind speed, like how high off the ground the unit is, and the shelter coefficient is affected by the exposed surface area of each unit. So those are the things that go into the infiltration model for each unit. And we're certainly open to other suggestions or ways of doing this, but we think this works pretty well. And I should mention that this is the leakage to outside, so you would need to do a guarded blower door test to get this. And there's different ways of doing this. I think the ResNet guidelines for multifamily give some options for different ways to guard or blower door test for multifamily buildings. So you might do every unit a guarded test, or I think you're able to do a representative sample of units. In the mechanical ventilation category, this is another case where the equations for the ASHRAE standard 62.2 mechanical ventilation are done on a unit-by-unit basis. And that equation is a function of the floor area and number of bedrooms of each unit. And the value that's displayed here, you can see, is the average CFM, so it's an average across all units. And for space conditioning equipment, if you have the capacity set to auto size, then that auto sizing calculation will be done for each unit independently. However, if you select a fixed size for the system, that fixed size will be applied to all units. And this applies to heating equipment, cooling equipment, and dehumidifiers. And I'll just mention on the output screen, the heating and cooling capacities that are displayed there are per unit averages and not for the whole building. In the duct category, the duct surface areas those calculations are done on a unit by unit basis. So the duct supply area and the return area. And the duct location can be unit specific if the location is set to auto, as it is for all of these built-in options. Then the location of the ductwork will be determined on a unit by unit basis, and it will proceed with the typical priority. That's basement first, then crawl space, then attic, and then finally living space for the location of the ducts. And the twist with multifamily is that the unit has to be adjacent to that space type for the ducts to be located there. So, for example, in this building, 2 locations are listed for the location of the ducts, unfinished basement and living. So if we go back to the geometry screen, we must have an unfinished basement. So the ducts for all of the units on the first floor would be located in that unfinished basement, and then the remainder of the units on the other floors would have their ducts within conditioned space. And maybe a more typical scenario is units on the top floor might have their ducts in an unfinished attic, whereas the other floors would have ducts within living space. And I know that conditioned plenum space can be common in multifamily buildings and a common location for ductwork. And the way we recommend modeling that is increasing the wall height. So say your floor to ceiling height is 8 feet, but your floor to floor height is 10 feet. You could change that wall height to 10 feet to account for a 2-foot conditioned plenum. And similar to the equipment sizing, if you specify user specified duct location, then that's going to be applied to all units. And water heater is another case where if you have the auto sizing algorithm selected for tank volume and input capacity, that will be done on a unit by unit basis. And that's based on the number of bedrooms and bathrooms in each unit. And all of the categories related to kind of occupant-driven miscellaneous loads, so lighting, appliances, hot water usage, and miscellaneous plug loads, all of those are done, those calculations for energy use are done on a unit-by-unit basis, and it's usually a function of finished floor area and or the number of bedrooms in each unit. And finally, it's not an option, it's not a category on the option screen, but the number of occupants in each unit is determined on a unit-by-unit basis. It's a function of the number of bedrooms. And I want to point out that it's actually a different equation that's used in multifamily mode, so slightly higher number of occupants per number of bedrooms is assumed in multifamily mode. And that's as specified in the 2014 Building America House Simulation Protocols document.